July 6, 1985, El Dorado Hills, California. Jane Anker Hylton and her daughter are living with her boss, Wilma Klein, after Jane becomes estranged from her husband. Also staying with Wilma are her grandson, Ricky Davis, and his girlfriend, Connie Dahl. That night, Ricky and Connie head out to a party, and Jane's daughter, Autumn, meets up with some new friends. When they all return in the early hours of the morning, they discover Jane's lifeless body, brutally stabbed 29 times. For 35 years, this case is a tangled web of lies, coercion, wrongful convictions, and unexpected twists. This is the story of Jane Anker Hylton, when DNA finally saves the day. Hey, y'all, I'm Chris Calvert.
And I'm her husband, Rob Potter. Welcome to Hitched to Homicide.
For better or worse.
Till death do us part.
Welcome back, everybody.
Yes, welcome. And for our friends in the Republic of the Congo.
Okay.
Because I know they're all listening.
Yeah, they are.
Boya bolamai, boya bolamai, boya bolamai.
Very nice.
There you go.
Nicely done. Well, wherever you're listening, be sure to hit that subscribe button. Then like, rate, and review the podcast so others who love true crime and can't get enough of it, just like you, can find us.
Yep.
And if you're watching on YouTube, hit that subscribe button below. You can find us on Instagram at Hitched to Homicide or on X at H2H_podcast. Is it going to go back to Twitter? Did you see Elon Musk? He posted something. Should I take it back to Twitter or just call it X?
I think you call it X for now.
Well, yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, but do you think he's actually going to do it?
I don't know. Who knows? He's very unpredictable.
So for now, you can find us on X at H2H_podcast. And if you want true crime with us every single day of the week, please join our closed Facebook group, The In-Laws and Outlaws. Go to Facebook and type in H2H, In-Laws and Outlaws. Answer a couple questions and you're in. Go join. Lots of fun people in there. We're getting lots of new members. We love it. Come on in. It's a party.
We love it.
We also now have a buy me a coffee link if you want to send Rob some coffee.
There
He drinks it all the time, and we were ready to go. And what did Rob say?
I drank all my previous coffee, so
I need to go
more.
make another cup of coffee. I'm telling you.
Yeah, well,
I'm telling you. You can find that link in our show notes. We appreciate all your messages and emails, and we are getting them. Let me tell you, I read them all, even the ones that you don't like something.
Yeah.
But I did get an email from Australia telling me that the case that we did that was in Australia, I got a thumbs up.
There you go.
For all my pronunciations. So thank you very much. I really do like the positive emails.
But you notice they didn't say anything about my good day.
Oh, well, I think it was just probably because I was like, I'm probably butchering these. Grant me some grace.
Yep.
But thank you to everybody for being with us each and every week.
Yes.
Well, this case is pretty interesting. 35 years in the making. I'm telling you what, it's a good one.
Okay.
Before we get started, let me thank some sources. The California Innocence Project, NBC, KCRA TV, Village Life, The Mountain Democrat, ABC 10 News, Fox 40 News, CBS 13, Case Text, the University of Michigan Law, the Folsom Telegraph, the Daily Mail, Law and Crime, and the Sacramento Bee. When you got 35 years of a case, everybody wants to talk about it.
There you go. Well, you ready?
I am.
Let's do it.
Jane Meriwether McMeekin is born in Wildwood, Acadia, Alberta, Canada on July 20th, 1930 to James Hindman McMeekin and Jane Alamina Tupper. So James and Jane.
All right.
Her father was in the military in Canada. I think they moved around a ton, like around the world, not around Canada, but around the world. There's not much out there about Jane's early life, and what I did find, I really had to kind of piece together. She gets married in Canada to Stuart Purvis on April 24th, 1952. Jane and Stuart crossed the border from Canada into Blaine, Washington, to become permanent residents of the United States.
Okay.
Jane is 21 years old. Jane and Stuart have a son together. His name is Ian, and then she and Stuart divorce in May of 1969.
Okay.
A year later, Jane meets and marries John L. Jack Anker on June 17, 1970 in Las Vegas, Nevada. And in 1972, Jane and Jack have a daughter, Autumn.
Okay.
Now, I believe Jack was married before. I think he was a widow. He was a widow before Jane. He has a daughter named Sue Ann who gets married in June of 1974. I found her wedding announcement. This is what happens when I have to piece together people.
Yep.
So Sue Ann is Jane's stepchild. But also in 1974, Jack passes away when Autumn is only 2 years old.
Oh, wow.
10 years later, Jane marries Archie Miller Hylton on June 8th, 1984 in Carson City, Nevada.
Okay.
Now, up to this point, I think Jane was a stay-at-home mom. She kind of had a decorating business on the side, but she's also a writer and a columnist, and she and her husband Archie and Autumn are living in Diamond Springs, California, which is east of Sacramento.
All right.
So she's writing for these little local newspapers.
Sure.
Jane was active with her work as an interior decorator. She also dabbled in real estate. She played in a bridge group. She loved working at her church. She worked at the Crocker Art Gallery and was a member of several groups in the Diamond Springs area. She was a knitter. She loved to knit, and she liked to knit for her grandchildren. So remember, she has a son, Ian, and a stepdaughter, Sue Ann, along with Autumn, who is still very young.
Okay.
Jane loved to read. Me too, Jane. She's an avid reader, and as I said, she was a columnist for local newspapers during the 9 years that she lived in El Dorado Hills, which is just 15 miles from Diamond Springs. So they're all really close together right around there.
Right.
Jane liked to bring to light causes that she thought were important, and she wouldn't stop informing the public about certain causes until she thought she had done it justice. So she's a little bit of a social warrior.
Yeah.
She had lived all over the world while her father was a Canadian military man, and she's really knowledgeable about many subjects like military battles and history. And according to her friends, if Jane walked into a room full of people, everyone knew she was present, which is just a really nice way of saying she lit up a room.
Exactly. There you go.
Heads would turn when she walked by. She was a beautiful woman, a redhead at some times and a brunette at others.
All right.
She was always dressed to the nines, according to her friends. She was very fashionable, and she had an infectious smile. Now, after Jane meets and marries Archie in 1984, our story is going to begin 1 year later in 1985. So Jane's a columnist for the Foothills Times, this little El Dorado, California county newspaper. In early July 1985, Jane's daughter Autumn, who's 13 years old, goes to Disneyland with a friend and her family. And when her mom picks her up on July 5th, they go to the house of Wilma Klein.
Okay.
Now, all I could think of was they were in Disney over the 4th of July.
Yeah.
God love their hearts.
Exactly.
But Wilma is Jane's employer. Wilma Klein is Jane's employer at this little newspaper where she works. And Jane and Wilma are more than employee-employer. Wilma and Jane are really good friends. And Jane has asked Wilma if she and Autumn can stay with her for a bit because Jane and her husband Archie aren't getting along very well. The quote I saw was that Jane needed a break from her husband.
Okay.
I'm just going to leave that there, ladies. That's why there's Target. So these two are fighting. Archie and Jane are fighting. And Jane moves out of the home that she shared with Archie and into Wilma's home at 2848 Stanford Lane in El Dorado Hills, California.
All right.
Now, when Autumn is home that day on the 5th of July from Disney, her mother tells her that she's leaving Archie and they're moving in with her boss.
Okay.
Jane is now 54 years old. So when Jane and Autumn make it to Wilma's house, Autumn meets the other people living with Wilma at that time. And let me tell you what, it's a house full. Wilma's grandson, Ricky Davis, who's 20, is living there with his girlfriend, Connie Dahl. She's 19, I believe. But Wilma's daughter, Maureen Klein, is also living there with her mother, and with her is also her boyfriend.
Good Lord. Sounds like a hotel.
Yeah, so now there's 7 people. When Jane and Autumn arrive, there's 7 of them living in this one house. Now, on Saturday, July 6th, 1985, the day after Autumn returns home from vacation with her friend, and she and her mother move in with Wilma and her family, and Lorene, which is her daughter, and her boyfriend decide to go camping. Wilma's daughter. They decide they're going to go camping. They get out, probably because there are now 7 people living in the house. So these 2 leave the house, and in the home that day are Jane, Autumn, Ricky, and his girlfriend, Connie.
Okay.
Now, that afternoon, Autumn leaves the house and she walks to a nearby pond. When she's there, she meets 3 boys.
Okay.
One is named Calvin. Another boy is named Mike. His name is Mike Green. And the third boy has remained nameless all these years because they're minors.
Well, yeah, okay.
Now, these 3 boys introduce themselves to Autumn, and one of them tells her that his big brother is having a kegger. He had a keg of beer, and they were going to party at his big brother's place later if she wanted to come.
All right.
And Autumn tells them, yes, that she needed to go home and change her clothes, and she'll just meet them later.
Right.
So when Autumn goes back to the house on Stanford Lane, she pretends to make a fake phone call, something you could do back in the day, kids, when your parents could not track you.
Right.
She makes a fake phone call. She acts like she's talking to a friend, that she's going to meet this friend out. And then Jane gives Autumn permission to go out and meet her girlfriend to go to the movies. But she's really going to meet these 3 boys for the keg party.
The kegger.
Also leaving for their own party that night is Wilma's grandson, Ricky, and his girlfriend, Connie Dahl. Now, Autumn meets these boys, and they walk to a tennis court nearby and start drinking. I don't know that they ever made it to the actual party. Maybe they just got beer from the brothers' keg and brought it with them back to meet Autumn. Hopefully not in a Tide, in a laundry detergent container.
Like super bad.
Like super bad, yeah. But they just go hang out at this tennis court and drink. But when Autumn makes it home, it's 2:30 in the morning, and she's worried that she's going to be in trouble for coming in so late.
Right.
Now, I'm unsure if Autumn is locked out of the house, because remember, she just moved there.
Right.
Or if she's afraid if she goes inside, she'll wake up her mom.
Okay.
So she waits outside until 3:30 in the morning with one of the boys, Mike Green. And when Ricky and Connie find their way home from their own party, they find Autumn. She's sitting on the front porch. And so the 3 of them go into the house together. So maybe if Jane hears that, she'll think it's not Autumn coming home, but Ricky and Connie. So maybe that's what she's doing. And if you think that's murky, it just gets worse from here on out, okay?
All right.
From this point on, the stories are going to be different, and I'm going to do my best to give you everybody's point of view and interpret it all as best I can.
All right.
Here is what is known. These are the facts.
Okay.
This is what we know to be true.
All right.
Sometime before 3:30 a.m., Jane Hylton is brutally beaten and stabbed 29 times. In some places through her skull.
Jeez.
She's bruised on her cheeks, her eye, her nose, her upper lip and jaw. She has defensive wounds to her arms and fingers. She has a bite mark on her back, the back of her upper left shoulder.
Wow.
And here are the stories. According to Autumn, Ricky and Connie arrived and they went inside together. Connie put Autumn in the upstairs spare bedroom. Then Autumn hears Connie scream, so she gets out of bed and runs to where Connie is and sees her mother dead with blood all over her. Autumn freaks out and Connie tries to calm her down. The police are called and the sheriff's deputies arrive and they speak with Autumn, who again is only 13 years old.
Right.
And she's also in shock.
Right.
And I don't know if they were careful with her or not while they're questioning her. Autumn tells the authorities that she, Ricky, and Connie came into the house together and that they took her to a bedroom to sleep, meaning Ricky and Connie.
Right.
Now, it's at this point that Ricky sees blood in the hallway and he tells Autumn to stay in the spare room while he checks it out. And Ricky tells Autumn that her mom is badly hurt, but that she is still alive. Remember, this is what Autumn is telling the sheriff's deputies.
Right, okay.
But while she's telling them, they say to her, Autumn, your mother is dead. and Autumn becomes hysterical, and she couldn't answer any more questions. I want you to remember, she's 13 years old.
Sure.
Connie calls Autumn's sister. I believe this is Sue Ann, so maybe her half-sister, but I can't be certain. Autumn sits on the steps outside until her sister arrives. The officers and Autumn's family tell her that she's the only one who could know what happened. And I think Autumn tried to piece it together, what she thought happened in her little 13-year-old addled mind.
Yeah.
She can't be thinking straight.
Right.
She's in shock. She tells the authorities that the reason they were at this home at Wilma's house was because her mother was leaving her stepfather, Archie.
Right.
She tells police her parents had been fighting over finances and family cars. And Autumn tells the police that her mother had said that the fighting had become physical and that her mother was afraid of Archie. And she tells police that she believed that Archie was capable of, quote, doing such a thing to her mother, end quote.
Wow.
Hours later, police arrest Archie Hylton as he's leaving his house that next morning, because remember, all this is happening in the middle of the night.
Right.
They tell him he's under arrest for the suspicion of murder, and when Archie says, who did I kill? They tell him, your wife, Jane, is dead. So this is how he finds out,
Right.
according to him, that Jane, his wife, is dead. Now remember, she's only left him days before. Archie tells police that the last time he spoke with Jane was on the morning of July 5th when she told him that she was leaving and going to stay with a friend. And that night, July 6th, according to Archie, he went to have dinner at Denny's and then went home where he stayed for the rest of the night. Now, Archie was released, but he provided police with hair and blood samples. And after this, he's never really considered a suspect again.
Really?
Nope. At the crime scene, police find blood in the entryway, on the upstairs bedroom door jamb, in the upstairs bedroom, and on the bathroom sink and cabinet. There's also blood covering an overturned lamp. There's blood everywhere. If she's been stabbed 29 times. Yeah. Jane's body is covered in blood. She's laying on the bed. She's laying on the bed like she would sleep, like on her side. You know how you kind of like curl up, crunch up like a rumpled piece of paper when you sleep? That's kind of the way she is.
That's the way I sleep.
He sleeps on his back.
No, I don't.
And snores.
Well, maybe.
And then I have to go, honey, turn over.
And turn on your
Roll
side.
over. Now, then, turn over and sleep like a crumpled piece of paper. Yeah. But Jane has wounds to her arms, her face, and body. Her body was cool to the touch. This is when the police arrive, and they're coming between like 3:30 and 4 a.m. And police also think the body looks staged.
Right.
Like she was murdered maybe in the floor where all the blood is, and then her body was moved to the bed after she was dead. An autopsy reveals that Jane died from loss of blood resulting from the 29 stab wounds. Her body was bruised, and there was a bite mark, again, like I told you, on her left shoulder that was inflicted while Jane was still alive. But she's been so brutally stabbed that police actually find part of Jane's chin cut away from her body and lying in the floor.
Holy cow.
Yeah.
There's rage.
Police believe, based on lividity and the contents of Jane's stomach, that Jane was murdered between 6 p.m. and midnight.
Oh, wow.
And the medical examiner actually thinks that the time of the murder was earlier in the night rather than later.
Okay.
Also on the night of the murder, Deputy Larry Hinnick interviewed Ricky Davis. This is Wilma's grandson. And when they talked to him, he's calm, his hair is wet, and he's had a shower, and he's barefoot. And he tells police that he found Jane's body on the floor and he checked her pulse. But where did police find her body?
In the bed.
And why has he just taken a shower?
To clean off all the blood.
Yeah. Not suspicious at all.
Yeah.
Now, while police are interviewing Ricky, they think that he seems just a tad too giddy. According to Deputy James Barnes, Ricky seemed exhilarated and he giggled and found it funny that Detective Barnes carried a shotgun.
What?
Ricky's not helping himself out in any way, shape, or form on this night.
Yeah, dumber.
Yeah, he's not helping himself out.
Yeah.
When Deputy David Stussy gets to the scene, he notes that Ricky smells of alcohol. But he didn't look like someone who'd been partying all night because he'd taken a shower.
Yeah.
But Connie Dahl, Ricky's girlfriend, that was a different story. Connie was anxious and upset, and police noted that Connie and Ricky were pacing and speaking to each other in hushed tones. So if there were directions on how not to act at a murder scene, Ricky and Connie are doing the exact opposite.
Yeah. Yeah, they could write a handbook.
Yeah, what not to do at a crime scene.
Yeah.
Ricky tells Deputy Strucy that he and Connie went to a party and that Autumn had left at the same time, but separately from them. Mm-hmm. He tells police that the three of them returned home at the same time. But remember, Autumn has told him that she was waiting on the steps.
Right.
Now, while all of this is going on, Ricky leaves the crime scene to go get a pack of cigarettes while the police are there. And while he's gone, the police do a little digging into Ricky's life and into Ricky's past. And when he comes back from buying his smokes, the police arrest him for cultivating weed. Yeah.
Okay.
So while they have Ricky in jail, police get a blood sample from him, and getting blood is a good thing because the criminalist who processed the crime scene found blood near the front door that he said was, quote, reasonably fresh, end quote. And that drop of blood was consistent with Ricky's blood type, but not with Jane's.
Okay.
Also at the scene is a washcloth that contained blood that was consistent with Ricky's blood, but not Jane's.
Okay.
There was a blood stain in the sink that was consistent with Jane's blood type. Remember, it's 1985.
Right.
No DNA. So all they can really do is sort of match blood types.
Sure.
Then on July 8th, 1985, 2 days after the murder, Connie Dahl, Ricky's girlfriend, she calls the police and tells them, I found a sheet, a hand towel, and 2 washcloths in the laundry basket that look like they're stained with blood.
Oh.
And she turns them over to the police. And after this, Connie will never see or speak to Autumn again.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow.
When Ricky is released, he and Connie move from his grandmother's house to Sacramento. And once they arrive, according to Connie, Ricky hit her for opening her mouth and talking to the police about the murder.
Wow.
And in the beginning, Connie is afraid to leave Ricky because of this abuse, but eventually she does leave him. A few months later, he calls and asks for her to marry him, and she says, no, thank you.
Yeah, smart move.
Yeah. Now, not long after Jane's murder, police interview Autumn again. Her sister, who's a social worker, and a friend come along to this interview. After it's over, Autumn appeared kind of dazed, and then she just sort of refused to speak. And her sister gets angry and tries to physically attack Autumn, which is really interesting because she's a social worker, right?
Yeah.
So what does she think Autumn knows? That's a question.
Okay.
This case goes cold. And Autumn is going to go visit a psychic. She's going to visit with psychiatrists. She has PTSD.
Sure.
But she does visit with a psychic who will tell her that the murderer has gray hair. That's called foreshadowing.
Oh, here we go.
Yep. Say it with me. And Autumn also has lots of dreams about what happened on the night of the murder. And she tells police that she had a dream in slow motion, that a man was beating her mother, but she couldn't see his face. She said he wore a dark sweatshirt and had gray hair. Autumn also has a dream that it was a mafia hit where her mom hid from her husband, Archie, and from death. And Autumn tells police that in yet another dream, she and her mom are in a car accident and she couldn't save her mother.
Okay.
Now, remember, this is a teenager, right?
Yeah.
But this case is cold, and police have nothing and no one to charge. Ricky and Connie were at this party until 3 a.m., and forensics say Jane was murdered way earlier than that.
Right.
So they have witnesses at this party where they were.
Okay.
Then on January 9th, 1986, just to cover all their bases, police give Ricky Davis a polygraph test, and the examiner tells authorities that the results showed that Ricky had some knowledge of the murder that he was not sharing, but that he was not the killer.
Really?
Yeah.
It's like a little Maury Povich.
You are not the killer. That's right. A year later, the police from Santa Rosa are going to interview Autumn over something else. Remember, she's a minor, so these records aren't available.
Sure.
But during this interview, she brings up her mother's murder, and she tells the Santa Rosa police that she didn't kill her mother. Okay.
Yeah.
She didn't think she could kill her mother, and that she wouldn't have the ability to get rid of the knife and then clean up the blood.
Right.
Oh, okay. Autumn, why are you offering this up?
Yeah.
She thought that maybe, just maybe, one of the boys she met that night at the pond and then later met up with to drink had murdered her mother. And when they ask her why, well, it's because one of the boys had a knife and he was throwing it at the ground.
Okay.
And Jane was stabbed 29 times.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I can only imagine he's just like throwing it at the ground for it to like stick in the ground.
Yep.
It's like The Outsiders or something. Stay golden, pony boy.
That's it.
An expert on post-traumatic stress disorder is going to say that Autumn witnessed her mother's death and experienced that intense trauma. She's also going to say that Autumn is so young and under that kind of extreme stress, her memory could be malleable. They could tell her things and she would think, yeah, maybe that's what happened.
Right.
This same expert says that Autumn's version of the events that night and the dreams she's told police about could result from her attempts to repress the memory of the event, kind of like partial amnesia.
Right.
And that's true. When you go through something that's really traumatic, a lot of times you don't remember parts of it.
Like my car keys. Sorry.
Well, then that's trauma every single day, honey. At least until... Y'all, he put this little shelf up in the laundry room, which is how we get to our garage. And it's got a shelf for him to put his wallet and a place for him to put his keys. He's trying. He's trying.
It works.
Autumn goes to live with her sister, and 14 years pass. Connie and Ricky have long since broken up and gone their separate ways. But also during this time, Ricky Davis robs a bank.
Uh-oh.
And in 1997, Ricky is apprehended and sent to prison. Not a good look for someone who police think knows something about a murder that he's not telling them.
Exactly.
But when Autumn is 27, the El Dorado County Sheriff's detectives Richard Strasser and Rick Fitzgerald reopen the cold case into Jane Hylton's murder. So DNA is now really helping to solve some cases, and they think perhaps it can help to solve this murder.
Okay.
And they start by interviewing Connie Dahl, the girlfriend of the guy who they always thought was suspicious, but couldn't pin anything on him,
Right.
who'd gone on to rob a bank. Good job, Ricky. Connie's now living in Eugene, Oregon. They start with her because Connie gave an interview after the murder and said that it looked like Jane was, quote, lying in bed like someone placed her there in the position she would normally sleep in, end quote.
Okay.
And Rick Fitzgerald has listened to the recordings of Ricky's interview where he says that he found Jane, quote, lying on the floor, end quote. Now, this is something that'll be contested as an inaudible phrase in the recording. But the original officers who conducted the investigation didn't think that anything Ricky said was hinky. But Detective Fitzgerald believes that that statement implicates Ricky because it suggests that Jane's body was moved from the floor to the bed.
Yeah.
And a 13-year-old girl's not going to be able to do that.
Exactly.
Police in Eugene, Oregon interview Connie. The first time Connie is interviewed, it's November of 1999. This interview is going to last 3 hours. And the detectives don't mince words and just come out and say that they're looking into Ricky as a possible suspect in the murder of Jane. And Connie tells them, I haven't spoken or written to Ricky in 11 years. Yes, we used to write letters to each other. There was no email.
Yeah. It's called paper.
Yeah,
It's really incredible. You should look into it.
Plus, maybe she's, if he's in jail, she's saying, I haven't written to him in jail.
Right.
But detectives Strasser and Fitzgerald, they tell Connie that they've reopened this investigation because of DNA testing and that they could tell everything from the DNA evidence. Well, this is true, but these two are bluffing. There's been no DNA testing yet. They want to see if Connie offers up anything just because she's worried.
Yeah.
So Connie tells the detectives that finding the body was the most horrifying experience she had ever had, and she gives them an account of that night that was completely consistent with her police interview that took place 14 years earlier. But the detectives bluff some more and tell her that they know she was present in the house when Jane was murdered.
Wow.
Then they threaten Connie with a charge of murder and say, if you cooperate, you'll be treated with leniency. They show her the crime scene photos, and they feed her all kinds of facts, including the fact that Jane had been bitten during the murder.
Okay.
By the time they finish with Connie, her account has evolved into a story that fits the facts the detectives tell her. Now remember, her story from 14 years ago matched perfectly with the story that she told them. But then they start saying things to her, and now she's changed her story.
Okay.
And now Connie's story is that Ricky Davis punched Jane in the face during a fight about Autumn, which ultimately ended in Jane's death. Connie says she acted as a lookout and that Autumn watched as Ricky stabbed Jane to death.
Wow.
Connie and Autumn then moved Jane's body from the floor to the bed, and all three left to go buy alcohol and practice the story that they were going to tell the police.
Gee whiz.
Now, Connie couldn't describe the murder weapon or how Ricky got it, and she couldn't say where he disposed of his bloody clothes or the knife. A week later, detectives interview Autumn and tell her, Connie has confessed that you were present when your mom was murdered and that Ricky was a, quote, monster career criminal and a dirtbag, end quote, who manipulated both of them. And Autumn tells the detectives that all she remembers is returning from a night out, waiting for Ricky and Connie in front of the house, entering the home with the both of them, going to the spare bedroom, and then hearing someone scream. She said she barely looked into the bedroom, but when she did, she saw her mother lying on the bed.
Okay.
And Detective Fitzgerald is still bluffing, mind you. He tells Autumn that he knew her hair was at the crime scene and that there was a, quote, clear bite mark, end quote, on her mother's shoulder, and he was not going to be surprised when it came back to her. And Autumn insists that she had nothing to do with her mother's murder and that she wasn't there when it happened. And she also tells police that she has absolutely no reason to protect Ricky. She barely knew the guy.
Right.
They moved in on July 5th and Jane was murdered on July 6th.
Right.
Now, they want to talk to Ricky. And he's not hard to find because he's serving his 12-year sentence in a federal prison for his bank robbery in Citrus Heights, California.
Right.
They interview Ricky and he gives them a similar story to what he said right after the murder in 1985. The detectives show him a photo of Jane's body and say, quote, this is how you left her, wasn't it? End quote. Detective Fitzgerald tells Ricky that he knows that he killed Jane. He tells Ricky that Connie and Autumn both told him what really happened. And then they tell Ricky that the DNA tests were now being done on the blood at the scene. They're still bluffing. Ricky says to these two detectives, Connie and Autumn are lying. I think he probably called them something else, but he said that they were lying.
Sure.
If that's what they said, according to Ricky, they're lying because I did not kill Jane. Ricky goes through the events of the night for them, saying that he and Connie left on the night of the 5th to go to this party, and on the way they picked up Sandy Meyer, Gabby Sunstead, and Michelle Hawk. When he and Connie got home around 3 a.m., they met Autumn outside the house. Autumn waited outside because she was afraid she would be in trouble for coming home so late. Okay. And Ricky and Connie took Autumn to her room, this guest room. Connie kicked off her shoes and said the floor was sticky. They call out for Jane, but no one answered, and they found Jane lying on the bed and that Connie called for help. Then Ricky tells the detectives that it always bothered him that he, quote, never checked her for a pulse, end quote.
Which is completely opposite of what he told him.
Exactly. In 1985, when they interview him, he says she was on the floor and that he did check for a pulse.
Yeah.
Then Ricky recalled to the detectives that Autumn had been angry with her mom, Jane. Ricky tells them that he believed that Autumn might have been involved in her mother's murder. Then he denied moving or touching Jane's body. But remember the blood on the porch? They tell him that it was his.
Right.
It's actually his type.
Right.
But remember, they're still bluffing.
Sure.
They're not going to be wrong, but they are still bluffing at this point.
Okay.
Then they tell Ricky that the jig is up. Connie confessed the whole thing. And according to the detectives, Ricky sat back and smirked. But then they start recounting Connie's version of the events, and Ricky calls bullshit. He says, this is bullshit. Connie's lying, and then he gets so angry that he pushes away from the table and he starts yelling at the detectives, hurling insults, was what I read, but I think he called him, and I'll explain that in a little bit.
Okay, all right.
But Ricky's in prison, so he's not going anywhere. So police aren't like, we got to worry about him. They know exactly where to find him.
Yep.
They interview Connie again on January 12th, 2000. They start out by showing Connie a video of the crime scene because they want to refresh her memory. And after watching the video, Connie, quote, remembered, end quote, more details, including that Jane tried to use Connie as a distraction to escape. Connie tells the detectives that Jane pleaded for her life during the fight and that Autumn watched as Ricky murdered her mother. Connie tells the detectives that Ricky was covered in blood and that Autumn was sprayed with blood. Connie says that Autumn and Ricky both showered and changed into different clothes after the murder and that Jane's body was stiffening when they were moving her. And then Connie tells the detectives that she now believes that Ricky planned the murder of Jane all along.
Why?
Well, I'm going to tell you why in just a second.
All right. I'm jumping ahead.
But at this point, you have to believe that these detectives are like, damn, we've got him. We've got him.
Yeah.
Then Connie keeps talking. She admits to the detectives that she was high on meth and had been drinking the night of the murder.
Okay.
In fact, she'd been up for a couple of days by that night.
Jeez.
And she tells him that Ricky must have stolen her meth and used it himself. And the more she talks, the more her timeline starts to fall apart. She says that Ricky and Jane fought for 25 minutes to an hour before he murdered her. And when they question her about the murder weapon or what they'd done with the bloody clothes, Connie just didn't know. And the police didn't have a murder weapon.
Right.
Or bloody clothes.
Okay.
Detectives Strasser and Fitzgerald tell Connie that Ricky murdered Jane due to his violent tendencies toward women and that the FBI was analyzing the saliva on the nightgown where the bite happened. They tell Connie when it comes back, it's either going to be yours or Autumn's DNA. One of you two bit her.
Mm-hmm.
And then it goes quiet because they've been bluffing.
Right.
No one's saying anything else, and they don't really have DNA evidence yet.
Right.
February 22nd, 2001, Detectives Strasser and Fitzgerald interrogate Connie Dahl a third time. And this time they say if she tells them everything, she would still be able to go home to her kids and her family. The detectives tell Connie that the case is going to trial and that her credibility would be determined if she would be sentenced for a, quote, misdemeanor accessory type thing, or to be a, quote, full-blooded half-partner, end quote, in the murder of Jane Anker Hylton.
Wow, they're pushing it right to the edge.
They really, really are. So Connie asks to see photos of the layout of the house to refresh her memory, because she admits her memory is fuzzy. Yeah, she was high on meth.
It's funny how meth does that to you.
And she's been drinking too.
Yeah.
And she still can't remember specific details about the fight or the murder weapon or its disposal. Then Connie says that she got involved in the fight and tried to stop Ricky from hurting Jane. And Connie also says that she was, quote, pretty sure, end quote, she was the one who bit Jane on the shoulder.
Really?
I'm just going to tell you now, spoiler alert, she didn't bite Jane on the shoulder. May 21st, 2002, the El Dorado County District Attorney's Office files a criminal complaint for murder against Ricky Davis and Connie Dahl. A year later, in April 2003, Deputy District Attorney Colleen Anderson tells Connie that in exchange for her testimony against Ricky, she can plead manslaughter and get a prison term of 3 to 11 years. And on that day, Connie Dahl pleads guilty to manslaughter in the death of Jane Anker Hylton.
So we don't really know if she did help in that. Yeah, okay.
They've convinced her that she has.
Yeah.
Also in 2003, Ricky, while he's still in prison, writes a letter to his girlfriend and tells her not to talk to detectives. Anything you send in or out of prison, they read. We talk about this a lot.
Yeah.
In another letter to her, he attacked everyone who tried to build a case against him in Jane's murder. Ricky tells his mother, remember her, Jane's friend and boss, he tells his mom not to cooperate with the police. And according to Ricky, they had their chance to build their case against him 18 years ago, but they couldn't because there wasn't enough evidence. Then in May of 2003, Ricky asks his girlfriend to go to the county jail and speak with Connie and ask her why. Why are you doing this? Then Ricky asks for his girlfriend to pay for a private detective, telling her the money would be well spent because he had a, quote, absolute foolproof plan that is really gonna work, end quote.
That sounds like a disaster waiting to happen.
Yeah, I mean, this is the same guy we said if there was a book written about how not to act after a murder. Yeah.
Oh, man.
He tells his girlfriend, who is working hard for this man, her name is Lavina. He tells her, quote, babe, this plan is so perfect, I should have been a brain surgeon. I got the whole story figured out. She's going to bite hook, line, and sinker. Trust me on this, my love. It will be the best money that you have ever spent. Actually, it guarantees my freedom, end quote.
Well, let me just say this.
How do you feel about the brain surgeon?
I've had brain surgery. Extensive brain surgery.
I knew this was coming. Rob's a brain tumor survivor.
And I don't think I'd want this guy operating on me. I'm just saying.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay. Go ahead.
Ricky tells his girlfriend, Luvina, to gather ammunition against Connie. And according to Ricky, his mother found evidence dating from 1985 that, quote, totally throws their whole story out the door, end quote.
Okay.
In July of 2003, Luvina, I hope I'm getting your name right, I'm sorry. But she goes to the county clerk's office to take care of a moving violation and ended up in jail herself because there was an outstanding warrant for her arrest.
Jeez, what a crew.
So now Luvina is writing from jail to Ricky in prison saying that she hopes she gets to see, quote, the crazy lady, end quote, which is what Ricky calls Connie. So now Ricky's ex-girlfriend and his new girlfriend are together in the same jail.
That's going to be a nice combination.
What are the chances?
I know.
Now, while in jail, Lavina tells another inmate, Kristen Webb, that she's looking for her boyfriend's ex-girlfriend, Connie Dahl. And Lavina tells Kristen she can't understand why Connie couldn't keep her big trap shut. Lavina also said that before the murder, a lady and her daughter came to live with Ricky's family and that Ricky murdered the woman. She tells Kristen that Ricky placed Jane's body on the bed, so that would explain any of Ricky's DNA found on the body.
Okay.
Lavina tells Kristen Webb that Ricky stabbed Jane 29 times and made Connie watch. But while both of these women are in jail, Connie refuses to speak with Lavina about the murder. Well, Connie's been scared to death by the detectives.
Yeah.
They're like, you either say you bit her or you're never going home to see your kids again. You're never going home again.
Right.
But a private investigator was hired. His name was Gregory Delatorre, and he was out tracking down witnesses who could corroborate Ricky's version of the events surrounding this murder. And Ricky asks this PI to interview some of the partygoers from that fateful night. Ricky tells Delatorre that he robbed banks and he had stolen things, but he wasn't a murderer. In September of 2003, Ricky gives Delatorre a handwritten account of what happened on the night of the murder. However, Ricky's version of the events was inconsistent with the information that Delatorre unearths from the party. And that's a problem.
Bummer, dude.
Also a problem, Ricky's just an asshole. He has a bad reputation and people don't like him. Right. So no one's chomping at the bit to come forward and defend him.
Right.
In fact, one of Ricky's neighbors is going to testify that she saw Ricky screaming and dragging his girlfriend up the driveway by her hair before the murder.
Wow.
And she tells police that she'd heard the same screaming girlfriend over and over days before.
Man.
Now, on the night of the murder, this very same neighbor, her name is Carolyn, she had a backyard party. Can you imagine living next door to this? And her party was from 6 to 10 p.m. And as her guests were leaving, she saw someone kissing a girl in Ricky's driveway. Or Ricky's grandmother's driveway, I should say.
Right.
So was that Autumn?
Mm-hmm.
And another neighbor, William Bishop, had a few unpleasant interactions with Ricky. Mr. Bishop is a narcotics officer, and he's upset back in 1983 when Ricky's dog was allowed to run the neighborhood, like loose.
Mm-hmm.
The dog got into William's yard. He chased his kids. He tried to bite them. And then Ricky walked across the street, got the dog, walked home, and tossed the dog over the fence. So he's an asshole and an animal abuser.
Yeah.
When William Bishop calls animal control after all this happens, Connie comes yelling at Ricky saying that the neighbor called the cops on the dog. There's a lot of swearing in there that I left out. And Ricky says to William Bishop, quote, "If you shoot my dog, I will blow up your house." Boom, 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 boom.
Jeez. What a neighbor.
End quote. He will later yell even worse things at Officer Bishop. And then he tones it down and said he would burn his house down and take his daughter's virginity.
Oh, my God.
So the terrible things he said, and it was in the record, I'm just not telling you.
Mm.
Then he said, quote, "I'll kill you, I'll kill your wife, and I'll kill your daughter," end quote.
Jeez.
So this is Ricky, not helping himself out at all.
And I get upset when the neighbor's leaves blow on our patio.
Yes, he does. Now, the officer pulls out his gun. This is Officer Bishop pulls out his gun and his badge after he's saying, "I'm going to kill you and your wife and your daughter." And Ricky tries to come for him with a metal bar. But when Officer Bishop called his bluff and just stood his ground, he's got a gun held on him. Yeah. Ricky backs off. And then he got in his truck and he drove away.
It's the only smart thing he's done so far.
For real. And loads of people are going to come forward and say, this is who Ricky Davis is. He's that guy.
Yeah.
But being an asshole does not make you a killer, Rob.
Yeah.
Ricky Davis goes to trial in April of 2005, 20 years after Jane is murdered. The first trial is declared a mistrial. Then a couple months later, on July 12th, 2005, Ricky goes to trial again. The prosecution is basing their case solely on Connie Dahl's testimony and the jailhouse informant, Kristen Webb. Remember?
Mm-hmm.
And the DNA test that showed a small amount of Ricky's blood was on the front porch. But there was no way to know when that blood showed up on the front porch.
So they had DNA at that time now?
They do have DNA of this blood spot on the front porch.
Okay.
And it's Ricky's.
Gotcha.
But they don't know when the blood showed up there.
Gotcha.
And Ricky lives there.
Right.
So it could be old blood.
Sure.
The prosecution claims that Ricky had a, quote, quick temper and a short fuse, end quote. That's an understatement.
Yeah.
He exploded over a minor incident, and then he murdered Jane. Connie says she was too afraid of Ricky to come forward, but when the police told her that they had her DNA and they knew she was a part of the murder, she took the plea deal because, quote, "the first one to jump on the bandwagon always gets the easiest ride," end quote.
Wow.
She tells this to the jury.
Jeez.
She tells the court that Detective Fitzgerald told her, quote, "You know you saw this. You know what happened. It is all over with. You've got your babies. What are you going to teach those kids?" End quote.
Wow.
But then Connie admits on the witness stand that every single time they interviewed her, she was high on meth. So she's high on meth when the murder happens, and every single time they interview her, she's high.
That's just crazy.
Yeah. The medical examiner says that Jane's body was moved from the floor to the bed after she was dead, quote, "for a period of time," end quote, which flies in the face of the prosecution's timeline.
Right.
FBI forensic examiner Alan Giusti testified in December of 1999 that he performed DNA analysis on the evidence collected from the scene and determined that DNA from 2 small drops of blood by the doorbell and the front doorstep belonged to Ricky. Then, now that they've come back and, they're prosecuting him.
Right.
They know DNA. So then he says that Jane's right and left hand fingernail scrapings revealed only Jane's DNA. But there was unknown male DNA on a fingernail that had been ripped from Jane's hand as she fought off her attacker. Giusti also says that there was DNA on a white towel found by Connie the day after the murder that had a mixture of DNA with Connie as the major contributor and an unknown minor as the other.
Oh, a 13-year-old?
He tells the court the minor contributor results were inconclusive, and he couldn't include or exclude Ricky as a source. On August 17, 2005, the jury convicted Ricky Davis of second-degree murder. The next day, Connie received a 1-year sentence in prison. Ricky got 16 years to life in prison.
Wow.
He cried out that he was an innocent man as he's leaving this courtroom. It wasn't me. I'm innocent. So Ricky keeps on appealing. November 2007, the California Court of Appeals upholds Ricky's conviction, and Ricky, who was acting as his own attorney, filed petitions for a writ of habeas corpus in 2009 and 2010, meaning he wants to be brought before a judge to secure his release because there's no lawful grounds for his detention. Then in 2012, the Northern California Innocence Project at Santa Clara University Law School was appointed to represent Ricky. And it's at this point that the El Dorado County District Attorney's Office agreed to DNA testing of Jane Hylton's nightgown.
Okay.
Hang on to your panties.
I'm hanging.
In 2014, the testing of the nightgown revealed saliva in the area where the bite mark happened. And the person who bit Jane wasn't Connie Dahl, as she had told them, while she was high on meth. It wasn't Ricky Davis, but some unknown male. Also, testing of fingernail scrapings from Jane's right hand revealed a male profile consistent with the male DNA found on the nightgown.
Wow.
The unidentified male profile was uploaded into the FBI Combined Index DNA System. That's CODIS. And not one match comes up.
Really?
Yeah. So when you go to prison, they take your DNA.
Sure.
And they put it in this CODIS.
Nothing. Wow.
Nothing comes up. Meanwhile, Connie Dahl dies of a meth overdose in March of 2014.
Wow.
In 2015, Richard Leo, a false confession expert, reviews the transcripts of Connie's interrogations. And Leo says that the interrogations that these detectives did on Connie, they were, quote, designed to pressure and persuade Connie Dahl to adopt an account that matched their pre-existing beliefs about how and why the murder of Jane Hylton occurred.
Wow.
Yeah, they did.
Yeah.
In 2016, the Northern California Innocence Project attorney Melissa O'Connell filed a petition for a new trial based on the DNA test results, and 3 years later, in April of 2019, Ricky Davis's conviction is vacated and a new trial is ordered.
Oh, wow.
Now, Ricky's not on his best behavior for this new trial. He acts a fool. He's got outbursts, all kinds of shenanigans going on in the courtroom. But in the end, on February 13th, 2020, the prosecution dismissed the charge against Ricky and made a startling announcement. They know the DNA isn't Ricky's or anyone else that they've interrogated, and the DNA isn't in the CODIS, so this person has never been arrested.
Wow.
But because of the Innocence Project, they utilized investigative genetic genealogy. And we've talked about this before.
Yep.
If you've committed a crime, left your DNA behind, doesn't matter if you've got DNA on file or not, they can find you through someone in your family who has got DNA on file through either CODIS or Ancestry.com or 23andMe or any of those genetic testing places.
Sure.
Now, a company called Gene by Gene takes over, and they begin to link the DNA sample with the saliva on the nightgown and run it through the public databases where, based on your DNA, they can identify a second, third, fourth cousin.
Okay.
And they build a profile right to the doorstep of Michael Green, one of the young boys who was with Autumn on the night of July 6th, 1985.
Really?
At the time of the murder, he was 17 years old and a high school student at Oak Ridge High School. As an adult, what we know about Michael is really limited. He's in his mid-50s now, and he lived in Roseville, California. He was known as a kind and easygoing person with an even temper. The night of the murder, Michael was 18 miles away from home, and he never really left that home. He lived in the same place for 35 years, either with his parents in the home where he grew up or next door to his parents so he could take care of them. Mike Green was arrested after they basically knocked on his door on February 11th, 2020, and booked him into El Dorado County Jail. He's arraigned in juvenile court. He's in his mid-50s, but he's arraigned in juvenile court because he was 17 when the murder happened.
Okay.
Green had pleaded no contest to the charge of second-degree murder. He avoided a trial where he would have had to face a first-degree murder charge. But when he did this, he doesn't have to give any details.
Right.
Why? What happened?
Yeah, because of no contest.
On September 27th, 2022, at the age of 54, Michael Green was sentenced by Judge Suzanne Kingsbury to 15 years to life in prison for the second-degree murder of Jane Hylton. Michael has never given reasons why he murdered Jane that night. During the sentencing, the prosecutor's statement included questions about Green's actions, suggesting that the motive was never clearly established. Quote, "You beat her. She had numerous blunt force wounds about her head and face. By your own words, you kicked her in the jaw and you bit her on the shoulder. Why was that? Was she trying to get away from you?" End quote.
Wow.
And what about Autumn?
Yeah.
Well, she addressed the court during Green's sentencing saying, quote, "You may have only killed one person, but ruined numerous lives. We forever have holes in our hearts," end quote. She expressed the long-lasting trauma of the event. Quote, "The nightmare we share just will not end," end quote.
Wow.
Autumn revealed that she spent 13 years of her life, quote, "as an orphan in a large family," end quote, indicating the profound impact the murder had on her life and her family relationships. She mentioned that she was initially labeled as a suspect by law enforcement back in 1985, which drove a wedge between her and her family. And this led to her being placed in the foster care system because she was unable to find a family to live with.
Man.
Autumn stated that she felt abandoned by her family and only recently had been able to try to reconnect with some of her siblings. She described the ongoing impact of the case, including the wrongful conviction of Ricky Davis and the eventual arrest of Michael Green, saying that the family went through multiple ordeals over the years. And as for Ricky, well, he got out of prison and was exonerated for the murder of Jane Hylton. He walked to freedom on February 13th, 2020. He filed a claim for $18 million.
Wow.
$1 million for each year he was held for the murder.
Man.
As of today, he is still pursuing that $18 million from the El Dorado County. He was given in April of 2020 a check for $480,000 in compensation from the state of California, $140 per day for each day he was wrongfully held. But no one seems to know why Michael Green murdered Jane that night.
Yeah.
Because they interviewed his family, his friends, and everyone's like, that is not this guy. He is not this way. He's like a gentle giant.
Wow.
What we do know is that when police came to arrest him, he opened the door and he's in his mid-50s, so he has some gray hair.
Mm-hmm.
And what did the psychic say?
Yeah.
The killer had gray hair. Yeah. So was the psychic seeing him arrested in 2020 when he's 52?
Right.
Even though the murder was 35 years before when he was 17?
Yeah.
And who was Autumn kissing in the driveway? Was it Michael? Was it another one of the boys while Michael killed Jane?
Yeah.
So still so many unanswered questions.
Right.
And all this time, 35 years, all these twists and turns, the police trying to get people to say things. And it was so anticlimactic that it was just Michael Green.
Yeah.
But still no answers.
Right.
But that is the story of Jane Anker Hylton. And that's all I have to say about that. She is only one, but what if one is all that's needed? Hospice nurse Indy Luce has fallen in love. After caring for billionaire Louis Thornberry until his final breath, she's now engaged to marry the heir apparent of the global tech empire, David Thornberry. But as the divinely marked Indy packs up her old life to begin anew, a sacred promise comes back to haunt her with a vengeance. As an unrelenting spiritual battle unfolds in the shadows, the descendants of those like Indy find themselves persistently lured and ensnared as a relentless surge of evil becomes an unstoppable force. With malevolent entities following her every step, what Indy doesn't know about her family's sacred covenant could tip the scales of good and evil. The follow-up to the paranormal suspense novel Lead Me From Temptation and Book 2 of the Divine Darkness series, Deliver Me From Evil, is now available March 29th, 2024, wherever you buy or download books, or go to chriscalvert.com. If evil prowls seeking someone to devour, can one woman seek and save that which is lost?
Seems to be a lot of holes in this case.
I mean, so many holes.
Yeah.
And part of that's because, Connie, who was a witness to all of it, was high and she kept changing her story, even though, that's why I said the first story she told was the exact same story that she told years before,
right.
14 years before.
Right.
Ricky kept changing his story.
Yeah.
And Autumn was kind of all over the place. So, but the police had this narrative and that's what they were jockeying for. And, Connie went along with it and that just sort of screwed up everything.
Well, the thing, and Ricky, he said, I checked her pulse at first. And,
yeah.
And she went, and I'm wondering, obviously he's a habitual liar. So was he doing that to say, listen, I was trying to help?
Yeah. Maybe.
Yeah, who knows?
And too, I'm sure he had been drinking as well.
Yeah.
And who knows if he was high on meth that night, just like Connie.
Yeah.
So maybe he can't. Listen, I forget stuff all the time.
Yeah. That's why I put the shelf in the laundry room.
That's why Rob has a shelf in the laundry room, y'all. So I can't imagine, being in a traumatic situation, having to recall things. Yeah. There's some things. Did I pick her up and put her in the bed? Yeah, you should be able to remember that.
Yeah, exactly.
But yeah, too many cooks in the kitchen, including the police.
Yeah. Well, I think we should move on to something that doesn't have a lot of excuses and do a little bless your heart.
Well, bless your heart.
All right, number one, I'm calling this garbage in, garbage out.
Okay, garbage in, garbage out.
Yep. An Oregon man who decided he was too drunk to drive chose to spend the night in a Portland nightclub's recycling trash bin, only to be picked up by a trash hauler. The club's garbage service showed up sometime after 1 a.m. The trunk emptied the recycling container and continued on its route.
Oh, my gosh.
Yeah, twice. Here we go. Compacting the load, police said. The driver later discovered the man in the truck. The drunk man had suffered minor injuries and apparently was feeling no pain whatsoever.
Oh, my gosh. So he was still drunk.
Yeah. The driver had to convince the man not to walk away as he wanted to, but to stay and get proper medical attention. That one when I found that one, I'm going, no, there's no way.
At least he chose the recycling bin. Yeah. So there's boxes and paper in there and not like
that's the only way he survived that.
Yeah.
All right. Number two, the harder you train, the luckier you get.
Okay.
San Antonio police arrest two men who made the mistake of breaking into a martial arts gym while mixed martial arts fighters were still inside training.
That is unfortunate.
Yeah, very unfortunate. Investigators said Carl Rogers, 21, broke into the gym through the garage door during the overnight hours, but was confronted by MMA fighters who were still inside training.
Yeah.
The fighters grabbed weights to throw at the would-be burglar, who fled. Officers arrived in time to find Rogers rounding the corner with a hatchet and the getaway driver, Adrian Sanchez, 22, waiting in the parking lot.
Adrian's like, I want no part of this.
Yeah, get me out of here. MMA fighter Caleb Murphy told KSAT-TV that he was glad no one was hurt. Quote, if he would have tried to rough me up or something, yeah, I definitely would have defended myself, Murphy said. I feel confident I would have come out on top. I think that's an understatement.
Yeah.
The guy has listen, I love MMA. I watch it all the time. This guy has no idea how lucky he was.
They're like, these hands are lethal weapons.
Yeah,
they're registered lethal weapons.
Oh my gosh.
But I think if you're an MMA fighter and you get into a bar fight and somebody really gets hurt, So I think you have to be careful when you're really good at that kind of thing.
Exactly. All right, number 3. And finally, a wrinkle in his plan.
Oh, I thought you were going to say A Wrinkle in Time, one of my favorite books.
No, this one's called A Wrinkle in His Plan.
Okay.
An 82-year-old man.
Well, there's a lot of wrinkles in an 82-year-old man.
Was arrested after he took a swim in a river in Arizona.
Tell me he had clothes on.
Here we go. You hang on to your panties. Maricopa County Sheriff's deputies were called to the campgrounds after a 14-year-old told her mother that an old man had exposed himself to her.
That's this poor girl. Yeah. He's 82.
Now, here's the best part. Police found John Phillips wearing a G-string.
Oh, no.
And took him into custody on 2 counts of public sexual indecency. That's totally a wrinkle in his plan.
You gotta hand it to him.
Oh, my goodness.
He's wearing a G-string at 82, honey.
Oh, Lord.
That poor girl.
Oh, my God.
My heart goes out to you.
She's scarred for life.
She is scarred for life.
So there you go. There's your bless your heart.
Well, if you have a bless your heart or you know somebody's heart who needs blessing, all you got to do is go to hitchtohomicide.com where there's a pull-down menu. And while you're there, you can also suggest a case and send us your true crime story.
Do it.
That's all we have today. That's my amazing husband out there.
And that's my beautiful bride in the booth.
Don't put on a G-string and go swimming at 82.
Guess I'll have to put my G-string away.
Join us next time on Hitch to Homicide.
Bye, y'all.